Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle Haas. And in this video, we're taking a look at GoCollect's hottest trending comics for the week of August 20. Now, for those who don't know, GoCollect puts out a bi-weekly article that switches between hottest comics and trending comics. This week, we got trending comics, which is a more curated list written by Matt Tuck about books that are really starting to move a lot in terms of volumes of sales in the market. But before I get into the video, if you guys could drop me a like or comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, helps support the channel, doing those things, I'd appreciate it. But let's get into this article here today. Of course, I will put a link in the description if you guys want to do your own reading, but I will break it down for you like I always do. And coming in here at the number 5 spot, we got a very cool book to talk about. One of my nostalgic favorite cartoons of the 1980s. This one right here is G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, number 1, new to the list this week, now sitting in the 100th spot, just sneaking in there. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is a book written by Larry Hama that came out in 1982 and would feature the first appearance of the G.I. Joe in comic book form. Now, I'm sure you guys all remember the classic cartoon G.I. Joe from the 1980s, one of my personal favorite cartoons. I mean, I feel like of all the cartoons of the 1980s, you got Transformers and G.I. Joe as sort of the 1A, 1B, depending on which one you actually liked more. But of course, the cartoon was an absolute sensation, and this would actually be the comic book source material that I guess you can make the argument that the cartoon came from. I mean, I know that they all kind of came around the same time, although I do think that the date of the actual comic book was a little bit before that of the Hasbro cartoon. So not really sure which one you want to credit as being the property that created the cult following for G.I. Joe. I mean, I know that G.I. Joe existed many, many years prior to this, but as far as like, how we sort of remember him in this current, zeitgeist with G.I. Joe, I think the 80s really defined that period. And this right here is the first appearance of the team, and definitely a book that a lot of collectors like to have for that nostalgia factor. Well, as to why this book is trending this week, well, there's not really any significant factor in the market that has caused an increase in demand. Rather, this could be just one of those situations where the book is finding its new floor. And I think where the prices are now, having been corrected from that of 2021, there's a lot of people that are seeing this as a good opportunity to buy this book. I mean, when we think about G.I. Joe as a franchise, we know that the name carries a lot of weight, and there's definitely a lot of potential for there to be, a cinematic universe built around G.I. Joe. I mean, when I think about, the success of Top Gun, and how it's like a pro-military film, it feels like if you're Hasbro or the studio that owns Hasbro as an IP and you're trying to make a G.I. Joe franchise, you should definitely be looking to Top Gun and say, hey, we should just do exactly that. Like, let's get, Tom Cruise to basically be Duke or whatever character we think would fit him at this current time. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for G.I. Joe to eventually find its way and make good content. Obviously, we got the Snake Eye film, but that was not reviewed very well. So I think that in the future, it's very, very possible that there could be a very successful G.I. Joe cinematic universe. And if that is the case, a lot of these G.I. Joe books will definitely go up in value. And as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. There's actually 3 9.9s on the census. Last sale for one of those was in 2017 for $2K. Would be interesting to see what that would sell for today. 9.8s have 763 on the census. Fair market value suggested to be 1,400. 30-day moving kind of right in line at 1,475. But like I mentioned, this is kind of a book, like many other books out there in the market, that has had a major correction from the height of 2021. And I think kind of where it's been, on this sort of steep decline that it's been going down in, I think that this is why it's probably starting to see new life in the market, because it's finding that new floor overall. I mean, you can just see from looking at the chart that this thing has really dropped off quite a bit from its previous record highs. Last couple sales here, 1,475, 1,165, 1,650, 1,310. So definitely a book that still is kind of hovering around that 4-figure range at the high grade level, which is definitely a high premium to pay if you want that perfect grade, because when you go into eBay looking for raw copies of this thing, I mean, depending on the deal you can find, depending on the grade, you can actually get one in the mid-grade range around that, $100 to $120 level or so. All right, let's move on now to the 4th hottest trending comic of the week. And the 4th hottest trending comic of the week is one that is really interesting to see on this list. This one right here is Amazing Fantasy number 1, new to the list, now sitting in the 90th slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this would be a book that came out in 2004, written by Fiona Avery, and would feature the first appearance of Anya Corazon, otherwise known as Arana, who is the Spanish Spider-Verse character. Now, as to why this book is getting hot this week, well, of course, Sony has been kind of developing their Spider-Verse universe. We know that they've been in developments with things like Madam Web and possibly Silver Sable and Spider-Woman and things like that. And there has been recent speculation that one of the actresses cast for the Madam Web movie could be playing filling the role of Arana right here, who makes her first appearance in Amazing Fantasy #1. And that, of course, is going to have, an effect on the market. There's going to be a lot of people who are now buying this book, speculating on this book. And it's really interesting because I feel like this particular run of Amazing Fantasy in 2004 has a lot of kind of low-key, great sleeper books in this. I mean, of course, we had Amadeus Cho. We got one of the Bloodstones in this one. We got a first appearance of the Supreme Leader from AIM. So there's a lot of good spec stuff that came out of this particular run. And it feels like Amazing Fantasy 1 is finally getting its just due to the fact that Madame Web might be including this character. And as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look here. 9.8s have 747 on the census. Fair market value is 210. 30-day moving is 190. And this is actually one of those situations where, the fair market value is kind of selling in line to even that of the prices that we're going for, back in 2021. Obviously, the graph is showing you that it's a little bit down here. I don't know what this one kind of crazy sale is, if this was maybe like some kind of newsstand copy or something like that. But you can generally see, like, with this new rumor, with this new excitement, it feels like there's a lot more movement on this book. People are thinking that this could be a character that has relevance in the future. And based on, the values that it's selling at now, doesn't seem like too bad of an entry point, considering that it's been selling at previous highs in the past. And then, of course, when you go onto eBay looking for raw copies of this thing, typically you can find them being sold around that $40, $50, $60 range. All right, let's go on now to the third hottest trending comic of the week. And the third hottest trending comic of the week is one that is interesting to talk about. I think we can all assume why this one is going to be hot this week, but this one right here is Predator #1, new to the list, now sitting in the 40th slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, this, of course, would be the first appearance of the Predator in standard comic book form, a book that came out in 1989, written by Mark Verheiden. Now, we all know that the movie Prey recently made its debut on, I think, Hulu it was, and a lot of people really enjoyed the film. I mean, the film was actually coming out with great reviews, kind of reigniting the fandom of the Predator universe. A lot of people have been saying that Prey has been the best installment of the Predator franchise since, like, the original ones back in the day, where we had, I think, Predator #1 is still everybody's favorite, and then Predator #2 has some fans, and then we've kind of seen a lot of misses over the years, or like it's been very polarizing with how people have felt about the Predator universe. But it definitely seems like with the success of Prey, there's been a new life kind of injected into this franchise, and that has a lot of people excited about, the comic books themselves and wanting to get their hands on this book right here. Now, it is interesting to think about, where do we go from here? Are people buying this book now because they feel like, hey, maybe Prey is going to get a sequel, maybe we're going to get more expansion into the Predator mythos? Is this going to be a long-term book for the future? Or are people kind of buying this book, FOMOing into it due to simply the fact that the movie was really, really good and people are excited at this moment? So kind of interesting to think about. What do you guys think? Did you guys see Prey? Do you think that Predator has legs as a franchise in the future? Definitely would like to hear your thoughts. But as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. This book has 392 9.8s on the census. So honestly, not that many. That's not to say that there aren't a lot of copies out there, just one that hasn't been graded too often. Fair market value suggested to be 750. 30-day moving is 762. Let's take a look at some of the value ranges, what this book's journey has been. You can see that, like a lot of other things, this has been a book that has had its spike in 2021. But generally speaking, this book has held up pretty well overall, at this 9.8 grade. I mean, it's definitely had a little bit of a pullback, a little bit of a correction, but for a 1989 book, that's really not that bad. However, now that we're on the other side of the movie Prey, it will be interesting to see what the value of this book is in the coming months. If we don't have Predator, top of mind, is the market going to forget about this book? We'll definitely see. And then, of course, 1989 book, not going to see it slabbed at the low grade, but typically speaking, when you go onto eBay looking for raw copies, you can see them being sold around that $100 to $120 range or so. All right, let's go on now to the second hottest trending comic of the week. And the second hottest trending comic of the week is a very cool one that is going to actually be linked to the hottest trending comic of the week. So you can definitely get a sense of, what property out there right now is having one of the biggest effects on the comic book market. But the second hottest trending comic of the week, of course, is the Sandman #8, new to the list this week, now sitting in the 22nd spot. It's pretty impressive that you're a book not on the list and you jump all the way up to the 22nd slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is a book that came out in 1989, written by Neil Gaiman, that would feature the first appearance of the character Death in the franchise known as the Sandman. Now, I'm sure you guys are all very well aware of the Sandman that has recently premiered on Netflix. A lot of people have been talking about the show, really, really loving it so far. I was actually able to watch the pilot last night. I really did enjoy the pilot, so I'm very excited to see where it goes from here. But a lot of people have been speculating on a lot of the Sandman books. I mean, there's a lot of course, first appearances in this particular title, and people are moving to those different books. Of course, Sandman #1, which might be a book that we're about to talk about in this video here, has been moving a lot lot due to the, #1 issue factor for it. But this book right here, Sandman #8, is the first appearance of death. And of course, in the mythos of Sandman, there's a lot of like otherworldly creatures and the whole like death mythos and that sort of thing. So a lot of people are thinking that death could be a really significant character, especially if this is a franchise that continues on for many, many seasons. And it definitely seems like with the fan reactions and where it's going and the quality of the show on Netflix, it feels like they could have a really successful property in the future. And that's created a lot of movement for this book. And so as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. 9.8s have 314 on the census. Fair market value suggested to be around 1,050. 30-day moving is 1132. So definitely a book that is, healthily selling at that 4-figure range. You can see it's had the journey that a lot of books have had, but the correction for this book, like I mentioned with the Predator one, being a 1989 book, hasn't been as bad as like a lot of other books have corrected, where, this is a book that has had maybe a 25% correction. I feel like if you have dropped more than 50% in your value, then you've had a pretty, bad crash. Whereas if you had a 25% pullback, that's really not too bad overall. And it definitely seems like this is a book that could have a lot of legs in the future. Last couple sales here, I mean, someone got a steal under 1,000, but it definitely feels like, the last 10 sales or so have been easily eclipsing that 4-figure range. And then of course, 1989 book, not going to see it slabbed often at the low grade, but when you go onto eBay looking for raw copies of this thing, you could definitely see them being sold around that $120 to $150 level or so. All right, let's go on now to the hottest trending comic of the week. And the hottest trending comic of the week is one that I already alluded to in the hottest, or the second hottest trending comic of the week, but the hottest trending comic is the one right here. This is the Sandman, #1, up 55 spots, now sitting in the #6 slot, the #6 most bought and sold comic book out there in the market. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is the first issue of the series known as the Sandman, written by Neil Gaiman, that came out in 1989. And this book right here would be the first appearance of the character known as Morpheus. Now, Morpheus, we were already introduced to in the Sandman show. Like I mentioned, I already watched the pilot, so we got an intro into that character. And this has been the book that has been, moving a lot in the market for quite some time. I mean, when Sandman was originally announced to be coming to Netflix and there was movement in the market, I think this is the book that had the most eyes on it. Obviously being the #1 issue, whenever you get adaptations into streaming series, it's always going to be the #1 issue that has the most attention first. And then as the series becomes more successful, people start to get interested into those other key appearances. But this is definitely the book that has had the most attention. And as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. 9.8s have 1,043 on the census. Fair market value suggests 850. 30-day moving is 865. And as you can see from the graph right here, there's definitely some big swings. And I think Go Collect has, some issues here with their coding, because we can see there's a low sale here for $7. I very much doubt that this book was actually sold for $7 here. So the graph is definitely affected by that. But you can see that, in the last 30 days or so, it's moving around that $900 level, 900, 942, 987, 900. Here's a slash price of 1,000. So definitely a book that is, again, flirting with that $1,000 price point. Will be interesting to see where the book goes from here. I mean, it's definitely had its correction like a lot of books have had in 2021, although, it's gone from that $1,400 range to the $900 level. So, basically that 20 to 30% correction, which isn't too bad overall for this book. But we'll see. What do you guys think about the show so far? What do you guys think about, the future for the book? Of course, you don't have to get the 9.8 grade. If you go onto eBay looking for raw copies of this thing, you can find them being sold around that $250 to $300 level. Definitely still a pricey book, but probably a lot more affordable than those 9.8s. Anyways, that's all for this video. Those were Go Collect's hottest trending comics for the week. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys have any of these books? Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and I'll see you in the next video.